Two police officers in blue uniforms pulled up to my garage in a patrol car. I watched them surreptitiously from under the lift, wiping grease from my palms and trying to gauge how angry they were. I thought it was strange that the police officers looked so cheerful, but they suddenly became serious when they approached me. After I confirmed my identity, they said, "We have bad news about my wife, Kate, who they said was in the hospital, although they couldn't give me any information." I naturally tried to leave, but they stopped me and started pressuring me, asking where I had been for the last 3 hours. I told them I had been at the garage all day and that they could check with Mike and Pete to confirm that I had been there. I felt a little awkward admitting that I had popped out for 10 minutes around 11 a.m. to buy coffee for the team. Two officers approached me, one of whom spoke to Mike and Pete, while the other wrote down the name of the coffee shop I had been at. After he asked to see my truck, I immediately took him to the vehicle. He inspected the car and finally allowed me to go to the hospital. When I arrived at the hospital, my heart raced when I was told how serious Kate's injuries were. She had lost a lot of blood, had undergone emergency surgery, and would need a blood transfusion. I felt very uncomfortable when I saw the strange half-smile on the doctor's face as he told me the terrible news. I considered it unprofessional and inappropriate. When I went outside, the same two police officers stopped me again and asked me to tell them more. We sat in the hospital cafe sipping coffee while they pried details about my marriage out of me. I told them that Kate and I had gotten married 8 years ago in Chicago, in Lincoln Park, by the Alfred Caldwell Pool. She had a successful career as a lawyer and always wanted children, but she wanted to wait until she was more established in her career. Just a month ago, she had quit her job to travel before having children, to enjoy her freedom one last time before becoming a mother. Then, out of nowhere, a question came that threw me off guard. "Can you tell us about John Barton?" I frowned and said I didn't know anyone by that name. They exchanged glances but gave no explanation and left. After making sure one of the team members had locked the garage, I started the car and drove home, where forensic experts and a detective were waiting for me. The detective introduced himself and told me what they knew, then asked me the same questions the police had asked, plus this. "I see some drops of blood in the bathroom on the first floor. Do you know where they might have come from?" I shook my head and looked him in the eyes. "Am I a suspect?" He sighed and assured me vaguely, "We have a few leads. My partner is on the phone with Mrs. Barton." The name was familiar to me, John Barton. "Who is John Barton?" I insisted. "I can't tell you that," the detective replied apologetically. When they left, something bothered me. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom and looked back over my shoulder at what I had just seen, as if it were new to me. 10 a.m. I was at work. While I was working that day, I kept thinking about them. Nothing special. Studies show that men think about sex an average of 67 times a day, and I was well above that by the end of a month of almost complete abstinence. The changes in Kate were sudden: mood swings, loss of interest, fatigue. I chalked it up to her new job and impending motherhood. I didn't want to pressure her and understood that her life was about to change dramatically, and that must have been scary. But that morning, I decided to breathe new life into our adventure and the fading passion between us. I told Mike and Pete that I was going to step out for a minute to surprise Kate at her apartment. Pete wanted me to test drive the car he had just worked on, so I decided to take it for a spin before heading home. My excitement vanished as soon as I saw an unfamiliar car parked outside the building. A visitor. I flashed with anger, but I didn't lose hope. Maybe it was a friend and wouldn't be there long. I went inside and called out to Kate, but she didn't answer. And then I heard it, the sound no man should ever hear. I froze, my hair standing on end as I recognized the unmistakable sounds of passion coming from our bedroom. I grabbed my phone as if it were a long-lost friend, I always filmed videos in the garage when customers brought their cars in to protect myself from false damage claims, and the same reflex kicked in. My heart pounding, I climbed the stairs, pressed the record button, and opened the door to see Kate on our bed with a man I didn't know. I was overcome with a wild animal rage, but I forced myself to turn away. I could have killed that man right then and there, but instead I leaned against the wall in the hallway, gasping for breath. They didn't notice I was there as they enjoyed each other. I don't know how long I sat there, wrapped in a blanket, until my body went numb. But after a while, the sounds of lovemaking subsided, and I heard whispers that were just as painful to my ears. I had to close my eyes and think for a moment to shut out my thoughts. I ran down the stairs and threw myself onto the sofa, away from the horror, the stench, and the echoes of betrayal. Despite the pain, my thoughts cleared, and a plan began to form in my head. Get rid of him, look him in the eyes, throw him out the back door naked. Then her. No violence, no traces, just quick and irrevocable humiliation. I had the perfect weapon for it. 2 years ago, while serving in the Army Reserve National Guard, I had acquired a flashbang grenade, a non-lethal device designed for use in hostage situations. It produced a terrifying white flash and a sound so loud that anyone nearby would be temporarily deafened. I grabbed an emergency axe from my workshop, tied a rope loop to it, and then returned to the room. This time I didn't even try to be quiet. Moans could be heard through the door as my fingers gripped the grenade. I entered the room, hooked the rope noose onto the lamp, leaving it hanging halfway down the room. I pulled out the pin, shoved the grenade into my pocket, and left, covering my ears and closing my eyes. The flash was blinding even through my closed eyelids, and the shockwave shook the entire house. He returned to the room as I had planned, ready to take revenge. But what I saw made me stop. The man was lying on his back with his arms and legs spread out. Something was wrong with his waist. Something was missing, but the sleeves of his uniform were rolled up above his elbows. Kate was lying on the floor, her eyes empty and her lips trembling as if she were suffocating. My mind was clouded with confusion. What had just happened? This was not what I had expected. I stepped back into the hallway, my mind racing. What had happened in that room was the worst thing I could have imagined. My thoughts were interrupted by 2 bloody screams from the bedroom, loud banging, and the slamming of a door. I understood. I was in danger of being drawn into a cycle of work leave, in which my idea was being shattered for the second time. Glancing at the mess, I noticed that the man in agony had fallen off the bed and was screaming, clutching his groin. Kate was clearly absent, probably in the bathroom. We had to erase all traces of what had just happened. I hurried back into the room, quickly looking around for clues of my guilt. I found the bomb detonator and hastily attached the casing to the rope. Everything else seemed to have been blown apart by the explosion. I took a deep breath and tiptoed into the bathroom. Kate was kneeling on the floor, vomiting into the toilet. At that moment, I felt nothing. No sympathy, no compassion. I just didn't care. As I wandered toward the door, my gaze fell on something on the floor. I bent down and picked up a warm, soft piece of flesh, a man's recently severed tongue. Without thinking, I took it to the bathroom on the first floor and flushed it down the toilet. They wouldn't be able to fix that. I tried not to make any noise and went out into the night. The distance between our house and the neighbors worked in my favor. When I got to the garage, I threw everything in my pockets into a trash can on the side of the road. 10 minutes later, I was back in my small work garage, gasping for air, my head spinning with thoughts. I called Pete and Mike, my greasy, oil-soaked employees and trusted friends. They arrived quickly, concerned when they heard my voice. "Can you both confirm where I've been for the last 45 minutes?" I asked, not giving them time to collect their thoughts. "Sure, boss," they replied quickly, but I raised my hand at the same time. "Wait, don't agree so quickly. Hear me out first." I warned them that what I had done was not a simple matter. When you find out, you may not want to get involved. I'm almost certain I could be charged, maybe even go to jail, I added, and started changing into an old jumpsuit, preparing a rag to cover my hands and face with oil when the police finally arrived. And then I revealed the whole story. Mike was the first to crack. He struggled to hold back his laughter for 15 seconds before bursting out laughing. Pete quickly followed suit, and in the blink of an eye, all three of us were laughing out loud. It took us 5 minutes to calm down. We shook hands firmly, and they promised their support as they returned to work. For the next hour, laughter rang out from the dirty rooms of the garage, and Kate finally got what she deserved. That evening, I was cleaning the master bedroom, scrubbing the bathroom floor. The bedding was off. I made a mental note to buy a new rug. The torn curtains also needed to be replaced. It was good to have distractions. There was constant knocking at the door, the phone was ringing, and the media hadn't even started working yet. The key facts, infidelity and loss of male dignity, turned my story into the most popular news story. I only opened the door once to answer the phone, then turned it off. Finally, I sat down without distractions to think and figure out if I regretted what I had done. Oddly enough, I didn't. I had never considered cheaters to be anything other than low-life scum, and I had seen how betrayal could turn them into that. But the real surprise was Kate. I thought she was as devoted to me as I was to her. And until recently, everything between us had been wonderful, if you can call it that, in the bedroom. Amidst the hours of anxious thoughts, one thought shone brightly. 2 months ago, Kate had said she was retiring to enjoy her last days of freedom. I was still concerned about that remark, thinking she would work until at least the 7th month of her pregnancy. It seemed to me that there was something wrong with her desire to spend the last happy days of her life before the birth of her children. My own cell phone pulled me out of my thoughts. Only a few people knew this number, and the information on the screen showed that it was Kate's parents, who lived 3 hours away from us. "How are you getting on with the boys?" I asked, because I had always got on well with them. However, her mother got straight to the point. "Do you know why journalists are besieging our house? They're coming, and we'll have to." She faltered, stumbling over her words. "Have you seen the news? They're talking about a woman who ruined her lover's reputation." I sighed. "Yes, Mom. Listen, there's no delicate way to break this news, so I'll just say it straight. That woman is Kate." There was a scream on the line, then a dial tone. The phone had been disconnected. I stared at the phone, and then it dawned on me. I had turned on the voice recorder in my bedroom that morning. The wound hadn't healed yet, but if I didn't believe in Kate's common sense and good judgment, I would never be able to trust another woman. I had every chance of becoming an unhappy man who hated women, doomed to years of hatred. Embarrassed, I pressed play. I already knew what was there. The memories of the pain were too fresh to revisit. I closed my eyes and let the voices play. The camera on the floor was filming the ceiling. "Kate, this has been the best week of my life. Does it have to end today? The offer still stands. Say you want me to break up with Sarah and marry you." There was a pause, and then Kate's voice came back. "No, it won't work. What kind of start is that? A woman marrying a man who left his wife and children. I love Dave too much to do that to him." "Really? You love him that much? Because the guy lying next to you right now isn't him." There was another pause, and finally Kate spoke. "I just miss the past. Before Dave, I was a pretty wild girl. I miss walking into a bar and feeling desired, the thrill of picking up a guy and deciding whether or not to give him what he wanted. Lately, Dave has been going deer hunting every weekend. 3 weekends ago, I finally went to a bar to relive the old days. One night turned into 2, and last Saturday I met you, and here we are." I turned off the sound. The problem wasn't me. I was a good husband and lover. She was just cold. Days of disappointment passed. 2 days later, the reporters left my quiet street. The hospital administrator called and said Kate needed pajamas. I refused, telling them to make do with the embarrassing hospital gowns. 2 days later, her father called me. He apologized for Kate's behavior and asked if I would mind staying in touch with the family. Then, as if to sweeten the deal, he added that he had another daughter who had recently gotten divorced. A few days later, Mr. Not-So-Big Show checked out of the hospital, but that wasn't the big news. The journalists did their job, finding enough dirt to expose him as a serial cheater. The cherry on top? Although he managed to restore his masculinity, his prospects for functioning in the future were deemed uncertain. It seemed like poetic justice. As the week drew to a close, I received a call from an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Barton, or Sarah, as she insisted I call her, was beautiful but had sad eyes. She explained that she had heard rumors that I might have something that could help her in her divorce proceedings. I said neither yes nor no, but simply replied that if I told her anything, I would have to confess to a crime. She understood and apologized for asking. I told her that she already had enough circumstantial evidence to win her case, but if the situation changed, she could come back and maybe, just maybe, I would change my mind. Something in her sadness struck a chord in my heart. However, my conscience pricked me, and I opened the video file and simply played back the end of that day. When the air was filled with her husband's agonizing, blood-curdling screams, she flinched but refused to give them the satisfaction of showing fear or pain. It could be said that by the time she left, there was no longer any sadness on her face. On a lighter note, I reminded her that she could come back any time if she needed to cheer herself up. And that was not the last time I saw Sarah Barton. However, the strangest visitor appeared on Saturday when I opened the door and saw the detective I had spoken to earlier that day at the house. His suit was gone, and he was dressed in jeans and a shirt. "Hello, son." "No, I won't come in. I just wanted to say that there wasn't enough evidence, so I recommended closing the case." I thanked him, and as he was about to leave, he stopped. Looking back at me, he added, "Listen, I'm retiring at the end of the year. If I come back, when I do, will you let me know how you prevented me from getting my life back on track?" I smiled and wished him a good day. Kate's letter arrived the following Tuesday. "Dear Dave, I can't find the words to express how ashamed and sorry I am for what I did to you. I completely understand why you didn't come to see me, and I forgive you completely. I never thought about all the consequences of my actions. Even in my wildest dreams, I couldn't imagine that my parents would disown me. I realize that I have lost your love, trust, and respect forever. How sad and painful it is. It's impossible to put into words. I don't mind if you never want to talk to me again. But if it will help you close this chapter, I want to tell you my story. Why I did what I did. So you know it's all my fault. You won't be able to speak normally for a very, very long time, the doctors say. Maybe never. It turns out that when I bit my tongue, I swallowed part of it. They are also considering some kind of experimental stretching technique that might restore function. I hope it works, but I need something, anything, to brighten up the bleak, sexless, childless life that awaits me. I don't care. Take everything you want in the divorce, I'll sign anything. Just leave me on your health insurance for a little while longer, and I'll love you forever. Goodbye, my love. I want only the best for you. I hope I haven't ruined your life completely. Your Kate, aka the cheating wife. The letter was so touching that I not only sent her pajamas to the hospital, but also immediately reversed my previous decision. Where the hell were Mike and Pete's numbers? Do I owe them a beer or a whole keg?